Deadpool Revisited. Just an update. It has this movie made so much money. Dominated the box office since its February 12th release. Domestic 235 million, foreign 255 million. That's $500 million on a $58 million budget film, not including marketing, of course. But
after just a 2-week run,
this is cuckoo bananas profits. Like this, and it's not even like a major character or whatever you want to say. Took the top spot again this past weekend, as predicted. The competition wasn't quite there. It was The Risen and The Witch, which
Kung Fu Panda was number 2 in terms of actual dollar amounts. But
that's good. Yeah,
the new releases like Risen and The Witch, they came in, I think, like 3rd and 4th. But they actually did pretty well on their own, smaller releases as they were. But Deadpool, kind of like we called, there wasn't that much competition coming up this past weekend, continues to dominate really well. And so last week we had talked about how Deadpool logged the best opening weekend ever for 20th Century Fox. Now that has extended. This unlikely superhero really has become
he's
the
an
best
anti-hero, Vince.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Has become the best performing X-Men movie for the studio ever, at least in terms of the U.S. box office. And that's out of 8 films at this point. And they have a 9th one coming out with X-Men Apocalypse.
Right. So the reason we're bringing this up again, and what the question pertains to is, after discussing its impact on 21st Century Fox last week, there was a question we received from Brian W., and it basically amounts to, since this is a Marvel character and Disney owns Marvel, does Disney see any of the profits from this movie? What's the deal there? And it's actually, this situation exists also with the X-Men franchise, as I recall. So what does this mean for the shareholders of both these companies? Like, how does that shake out?
Sure. So, we talked a little bit more about 20th Century Fox's studio, obviously part of 21st Century Fox. I know it can get a little confusing sometimes.
Oh, did they change the name? Oh, wow.
But Brian, if you're listening, thanks again for the question. I kind of wish we had just covered this last week as well, but it's good because I needed to get some of the research done, and I actually had a follow-up to the response I sent him, actually. So I think a lot of moviegoers were surprised and maybe a little bit probably relieved, too, to find out, the company that's known for, you think about Disney, maybe Frozen, WALL-E, Disney Princesses, and then you get this, like, very heavy rated R flick. Doesn't really sit, I guess, as well within that range of films from Disney, but obviously put out by 20th Century Fox, what is Disney's role in all this? And otherwise, we, in doing, the research, trying to find out the background in terms of how they share profits, who gets rights to what, we learned that basically Marvel has a lot of these kinds of agreements. It can get, pretty convoluted. So, Marvel, before it was purchased by Disney in 2009 for like $4 billion, they had their 3 business, operating segments, essentially. They had their publishing, think more traditional.
Comic books.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they had their licensing business, which is what we're going to touch on, and they had their film production. But then keep in mind that they didn't even start producing their own films until like 2006. They took out this huge credit facility in order to fund those efforts. But before that, they generated the revenue by basically allowing other, major studios to license their character, intellectual property, essentially, and then to produce films. And another example that we had looked at previously was Sony and Spider-Man, where Sony acquired those rights, I think it was like in 1999, and they ended up producing 5 Spider-Man movies. And those, I think, really paved the way for some of these bigger superhero films. They did super well at the box office. 2 different, basically 2 different reboots, right? One with Tobey Maguire, one with Andrew Garfield. And in that agreement, Marvel and eventually Disney, after the acquisition, they actually kept the rights to things like the TV shows, merchandising, and other platforms and outlets. But the company still benefited from a lot of the surging popularity for the character itself that accompanied each movie, naturally.
Right.
And the thing is, Sony and Disney signed a deal in February of last year, as if things didn't get complicated enough, where they are changing their relationship a little bit because the most recent movie that Sony put out, I think it was The Amazing Spider-Man 2, didn't do as well in the box office as they had hoped. They canceled a 3rd installment in what was supposed to be that trilogy. And so now the new agreement, interestingly enough, has Sony Sony basically saying, okay, Disney, you can use Spider-Man in your upcoming movies, tie-ins with like the Avengers, we'll still also be able to portray the character in our own standalone films, but that we would both benefit from the tied-in marketing and just, I guess, reboot again of this character in another trilogy.
That sounds really convoluted.
And
it sounds really messy, but okay.
You know, in that agreement, they both actually retain they basically get to keep the profits from each film. I don't really think they share in that. It's just more of like a mutually beneficial situation. Now, the difference here, rolling back to Deadpool, is that 20th Century Fox, just to give some background, acquired X-Men rights way back in 1993, and I thought that Disney actually had a similar arrangement with Spider-Man, but after following up on doing some more reading and getting some input actually from one of our Fool.com writers, Tim Byers, he was able to find this court legal filing essentially that shed some more light on the actual relationship between Fox and Marvel and what this means for the movies. So, you're going to laugh at this number, I know you will. Fox acquired the X-Men live-action and animated rights from Marvel for $2.6 million. So, and...
Hold on. They got the rights to these two...
Keep in mind, this is way back in 1993, before all the...
That doesn't make it right.
Before the potential.
That doesn't make it right.
Showed itself, I think.
There was the X-Men
they also
alone,
get...
the
They
X-Men
also
cartoon
get,
alone from the 90s.
They also get... Before I finish, let me finish, is they also get a percentage of the gross box office receipts, but those generally seem to be small based on what...
You can't even get a house in D.C. I mean, granted, D.C. is really stinking expensive compared to the rest of the country, but you see what I'm saying.
Yes, of course.
You're talking about a house north of DuPont Circle for the rights to...
Again,
all right,
this
whatever.
is over 20 years ago.
All right, I'll deal.
Just keep that in mind. So... You know, it purchased those rights for $2.6 million, and in terms of what that percentage of the gross box office receipts actually came out to be, in that legal filing from 2001, actually, the original X-Men film generated about $160 million in profits for Fox. You know, not bad at all. While Marvel earned just about $6 million in back-end contingent compensation. So that's about 2% of worldwide ticket sales. So we're thinking maybe that 2% is what the fees actually, were agreed to. So assuming it hasn't changed, it could have, but, we don't have the details. But assuming it hasn't changed since that time, based on that almost $500 million that Deadpool has generated in total worldwide ticket sales, Disney would only be getting about $10 million from that. So a pretty small nominal amount.
Right.
And the thing is, supporting the idea that Marvel maybe undersold a lot of its characters, like the licensing rights earlier on, before they realized like how these huge blockbuster franchises can go. Disney, since acquiring Marvel, has been pretty active in reacquiring rights, including I think like Black Panther was part of that, and also Scarlett Johansson's character,
Black Widow.
Yes, exactly. And so I think they have reevaluated some of those agreements, seen the value that they're losing out on, and now they're kind of trying to fix that. But, for Brian and for other listeners, just to give you that background, Disney has different agreements with these studios, and in some cases, they're much better than others.
Right. Okay. Cool. So how big a deal do you think this is before we move on for the shareholders of each company? Because we saw that 20th Century Fox, their share price was up 3% after Deadpool, the box office results and everything.
We talked about how their studio segment is essentially their second largest one. It's important, and the thing is, a huge success like this film or Star Wars: The Force Awakens, we've seen the impact that can have on quarterly results for sure, and the long tail that it's likely to have with a franchise. But it's still one film in a business that we talked about. Hollywood can be really choppy. Who knows? Hopefully, the second Deadpool's awesome. I really like the first one, but there's no guarantee of that.
Right.
And so it's bigger impact for Fox, certainly. For Disney, I'm sure they get that lift in general from having another Marvel character become a huge blockbuster success. But obviously, it's not going to be as nice a lift for them. So.
Got it.